The Ghost in the Warehouse. I'll preface this by saying I've never been a big believer in the paranormal, but this experience definitely challenged my skepticism. Between 2016 and 2018, I was a supervisor in a warehouse. Over that period of time, but more towards the end of my time there, 3 separate things happened that I found spooky. The reason being, all 3 were corroborated by other staff members or contractors with no knowledge of the events happening to me too. It's also important to know my company had 2 units, one at either end of the building, and there was another company who owned the larger middle unit. The first thing that happened was seemingly insignificant, but turned out to be pretty creepy. Whilst walking down the aisles, picking orders, I'd sometimes hear whistling, the sort of whistle you'd make when you're hiding from someone and you wanted to taunt them. The first couple of times it happened, I'd look for the source, a smile on my face thinking it was one of my colleagues playing with me. There weren't many places one could hide, mind you. There were 5 aisles that ran the full length of the warehouse, and they were narrow. Only one aisle dissected the 5 long aisles down the middle, and you could see between shelves and through most of the racking. Even so, I could never find the source, and after that, I just shrugged it off as I couldn't be bothered playing along. Weeks later, one of my colleagues who worked in the other unit told me he used to get freaked out down there because he'd always hear whistling when he was on his own. There were only 2 people working in that unit the vast majority of the time, and he said he heard the whistle coming from inside the warehouse when the other guy was outside having a cigarette. So it couldn't have been him. He even mimicked the whistle, and it was the exact same one I used to hear. The second thing that was probably more eerie was, I once heard my name being called by a bodiless voice. I was working in the packing area. I was the only person in there, and I heard, faintly at first, my name. I thought maybe it was the radio and it just sounded like someone calling my name. Then I heard it again, this time more clearly. So I walked to the end of the packing area where it opened up to the warehouse. Not a soul. I even went to the little canteen area where one colleague was sat and asked if he was shouting at me, which he denied. And it wouldn't have sounded so loud if he was doing it from the other side of a wall. Then I heard it a third time, this time clear as a bell. I went out into the warehouse shouting, "Hello? Hello? Is someone shouting at me?" There was no one there at all. I checked down every aisle. I even walked through to the office to see if one of the office staff had come in looking for me, but they all denied it and said no one had left the office in that time. The weirdest part about the whole thing was a few days later, a different colleague, who wasn't even there that day, told me when I'd come back up from the other unit that he'd heard someone shouting my name while he was alone. Not his name, still my name. The final and most scary thing that happened to me was when I saw a man out of my peripheral vision walking down the aisle next to me, parallel to me. As soon as I'd registered someone there, I looked across through the gaps in the racking, but there was no one there. We see things out of the corner of our eyes all the time, but the thing is, I'd seen him in detail. He was about 60 years old, with ashen hair, glasses, and was wearing white overalls. The uniform at our warehouse was a black polo shirt. I have a pretty good imagination, but I don't think I could have conjured up that vivid an image in a split second. A few days later, I was down at our second unit, and there were a couple of subcontractors there putting up some more racking for us. I got talking to one of them, and he said to me that they were nearly done and he was going to come in on Saturday morning to finish. But only he could make it and didn't come in on his own without his colleague. I said, "Is that a health and safety thing that you can't be here on your own?" He replied, "No, it's just whenever I'm here on my own, I see a bloke in white overalls walking about and it freaks me out." I felt a tingle run down my spine and legs. And he must have saw the look in my eyes, because as soon as he noticed my expression change, he asked me, "You've seen him, haven't you?" I still don't know what to make of it, but it creeped me out to no end. Traumatizing Nightshift. True story. This is probably the creepiest, most unexplainable thing that has ever happened to me. I used to work overnight as a security guard at the local port. Usually one of the port workers would stay overnight except for the safety official. I wouldn't be on the shift alone since the site had a radius of nearly 2 miles. Overnight, usually there would be 3 guards including me. Since the area was fairly big, there were different posts, but front gate was the main entrance area where all of the guards would be stationed overnight, since there was no need to put them in other posts due to the fact that there was no activity in the site at this time. The veteran guards that have been there for years would often say that the site was haunted, given the fact that there have been accidents and deaths that occurred in the area a long time ago. I was aware that people died there due to freak accidents, and I do believe in angels and demons since I'm actually a religious person, But I always thought that the older workers were just messing with the new guys. I would work 5 to 6 nights out of the week, and for the first few weeks, I never really saw or heard anything out of the ordinary, except for maybe a few questionable creaks, and would see a few misplaced objects while doing my patrol rounds. Just to describe the setting to you, this is a fairly big site, and on occasions, when there were big projects being constructed at the port, the workers would sometimes stay overnight. Due to the fact that there were times where port workers were required to stay at the port for a few days, there's a gym on the site for their convenience. The gym is fairly old. In the gym there's a sauna, weights, and even a racquetball court. If you don't know what a racquetball court is, it's similar to an indoor tennis court with thin plastered walls and thick glass doors. Usually on our patrol rounds, me and one of the other guards, Mike, would stop by the gym and play a few rounds of racquetball before returning back to the front gate. On one of those nights, me and Mike decided to hit a full workout instead of playing racquetball in the cage. This is around 2:30 a.m., and the entire building is so quiet that you can hear the electricity running through the lights. The air conditioner is off, and so is everything else. The only thing that's running are the lights. 15 to 20 minutes into the workout, we hear a loud thump. We crossed it off as nothing and continued working out. Then after a few more minutes, we heard the loud thump once more. At first we thought it was our lieutenant, who could have been walking around, but then we radioed him and he gave up his location, which was front gate. We tried thinking logically on what could be making those thumps on the wall. They were coming from the court on the other side. We thought it was the air conditioner, but then remembered that it was off, and even when it switched on during the day, there's no reports of thumps coming from the air conditioner. After a few more minutes, the thumps started occurring one right after another. We were very creeped out at this point, but what we were about to witness still scares the absolute shit out of me till this day. We started to approach the other side of the gym to where the glass door was. We turned on the flashlight and aimed it towards the clear glass door, and I got chills all over my body, and I started tearing so much out of fear, and I was about to cry. We saw one of the balls rolling slowly by itself inside the court, but there was no one in there. So that means the loud thumps were the balls mysteriously being tossed against the wall as if someone, or something, was playing inside the cage. We were both so confused and frightened to how this was really happening. We couldn't make sense of any of it. We were scared shitless, and we started yelling and running away because we knew that there was probably something evil toying with us right there. As we sprinted full speed back to the front gate, the lieutenant saw us and asked why we were tearing and running in a ridiculous manner. We told him what we witnessed, and his facial expression scared us even more. He then said, "That's why there's always guards that quit often. There's something evil in the area, and it's not the first time that something bad has happened here." He then showed us security footage of dark figures and shadows literally passing through the office areas, and lights mysteriously switching on and off. Till this day, I still get chills recounting my experience with my friends and family. And I'm even getting chills right now as I'm typing this. I had never had a real encounter with the supernatural until that night. Many say that it was a demonic presence messing around. Others say it was a ghost of a dead person who died in the area. I don't know what it was, but I didn't last long at the job after that. There were other experiences, but I'll send it at a later time. The Work Stalker. A few years back, I had this really creepy experience with an older coworker of mine that still kind of shakes me to this day. It happened at this place I had been working at for a couple of years at that point. The place was a small factory of sorts, with only less than a handful of employees, including myself. One day, though, my boss introduced us to this new, older guy that he'd brought in to start working in the other, newer side of the factory. You see, the factory where he worked had two different sides to it. One side for beeswax and one side for wood production. My boss had brought him in because they went to church together, and the wood production on the other side had a religious significance. The new older coworker worked there with us for about 1 month before he approached me one day and introduced himself to me. He seemed like a nice guy and even came back to give me a Hershey kiss not long after that. A couple months later, I got asked by our boss if I could go pick up my new older coworker, probably because his car was broken down or something. I agreed to it. So my boss asked me if it was okay to give the coworker my phone number so that we could coordinate via text. I said it was fine and went on my way. I brought him back to the factory with no problems. Soon after that, though, I started to get random and sporadic texts from him late at night. At first the texts were just about us maybe hanging out soon, while simultaneously apologizing to me because he knew he was much older than I. But then the texts started to get pretty pervy, and they would be as long as a mini book. The texts were just long, misspelled, random, pervy compilations. I tried to just ignore the texts, but that only made them start coming more frequently. One day in the midst of all this, my roommates were scrounging for a ride to a casino only a few miles from our house. I gave them a few dollars for a ride, and they said they'd find their own ride back. So imagine my surprise when they returned only a couple hours later, and they had found their own ride all right. The ride was my creepy coworker. Not only was I creeped the hell out that this pervy jerk now knew where I lived, but I also didn't know how he came to give my roommates that ride. Was it just sheer coincidence, or something more? A few days after that, I went to visit a friend at his apartment that was located on our main street running through our small historic downtown area. When I came downstairs from his apartment, as he was located on the second floor, I made my usual turn, walking on the sidewalk in front of all the main street shops. As I walked past one of the shops that was maybe 2 doors down from my friend's apartment, I thought I saw something out of the corner of my eye. But it couldn't be, could it? To my great dismay, it was him, my creepy-ass older coworker, standing in the doorway of one of the shops and smiling creepily at me from under a black top hat. A couple of weeks after that little incident, I noticed him again as I left my friend's apartment. He was just standing on the sidewalk with that same creepy grin plastered on his gaunt face. Since I had already informed my friend about last time, I simply texted him real quick to let him know the creep was back. I got into my car and left after sending the text, so I didn't find out until later that the creepy coworker was gone by the time my friend got downstairs to the sidewalk. At that point, though, the texts were still coming even faster than before. He was even threatening to come to my house if I didn't respond. Long, provocative texts dictating what he'd like to have happen between us if he did just happen to show up at my house. When I would see him during the day at work, though, he would act as though everything was normal, giving no hint of his nighttime persona. After seeing him yet again as I left my friend's apartment, I just so happened to overhear a couple coworkers of mine standing around discussing how weird our new older coworker was. Right then I stepped in and joined the convo, finally showing one of my other coworkers the text messages that the creep had been sending me. I had been working with that particular coworker for a few years, but I didn't know him too well. He was one of those people who came off kind of grumpy and distant. Still, I told him and my other coworker not to say anything. They both nodded in agreement, and we went our separate ways to finish up the day. When I came into work the next day, though, my boss immediately called me into his office. My boss told me that he'd been informed of the situation and the texts, and he wanted to see my phone to read them. I told my boss that I didn't really want to get anyone in trouble, but he said that was besides the point, and that my situation needed to be addressed. My boss also stated that my older coworker had no right or reason to be texting me and talking to me the way he was talking to me. The boss must have had a pretty good talk with him because all the crap stopped from the older coworker after that. The other grumpy coworker of mine apologized to me for saying something to the boss, but I completely understood, and I was actually pretty grateful to him for that. I should have been the one to take the initiative to talk to the boss about it, but I was just too chicken. Fortunately, though, that situation seemed to work out for all involved because life went on as usual and everyone involved acted as though nothing had ever happened. Well, I can't really say that because the situation actually caused the grumpy coworker and I to talk more, and we started dating. We were together for about 3 years and then we got married. So creepy old coworker, let's not ever meet again, or I think my husband will certainly have something to say about it. I used to work night shifts until this. I almost never touch on this story because it's not one of those classic scary stories everyone likes to share around a few beers. I used to work night shifts at this large manufacturing facility. Night shift was a very small crew. 5 security and 5 of us running admin and packing. As admin staff, I sat with security as they'd switch between patrolling and monitoring the cameras. It was usually pretty silent and boring. No, I'm not sure how the building got its haunted story. No one besides us ever wanted to work night because of the rumors. None of us ever had any experiences. No one died there. No crazy accidents happened. It wasn't destroyed and rebuilt. It was peaceful and uneventful. But stories always spread, as they tend to do with big, dark, creepy spaces. And it was creepy. It's surrounded with woods, circled with fencing. Mostly empty at night, which made it feel incredibly imposing and empty. Creepy motion-activated lights inside and out. Sounds carried and echoed. But still none of us had any experiences there until this. It was around Halloween, maybe a week or 2 before it. I was halfway into my shift, making it my lunch hour. It was chilly, and I went to my car to grab my bigger jacket and have a smoke break. I was right outside the back door, which the fencing runs closest to. It's maybe 10 years off the back door. The only light is motion activated, and I had to keep making grand arm movements to keep it on. It's all grass and shadows up to the fence, and the light doesn't really hit that far. I was watching videos on my phone and the light cut out. I sat in the dark a bit, sipping my coffee and finishing my cigarette. As I was finishing, I reached up and waved about to activate the light and find the ashtray. But as the light flickered on, I heard a noise at the fence across from me. We do get some animals out there, and they could get startled. It was all explained in my head instantly, but as I stood up, I heard the fence keep slightly jingling. When I looked up, I didn't see much. The light didn't really illuminate much outside circle on the ground. I don't know why, but my first thought was to say, "Hello?" When I did, the sound stopped for a moment. I squinted into the darkness trying to adjust. The light went out. There in the darkness, the moon had a little more effect lighting up the area. The fence started lightly jingling again. Really lightly. As my eyes adjusted better, I saw movement. It looked like a person opposite me at the fence, fidgeting with the links. I thought this must be a kid trying to spook us. Maybe they were going to break in and ghost hunt. Some high school kids have before without knowing the building never closed, and we were usually pretty cool with them poking around as long as they didn't touch anything and made it fast. So they could run and tell their friends they lived through it, but that wasn't really common, as this was one person, alone. It felt off. I radioed in with my walkie to the security desk. "Hey, we have a visitor out by the north door behind the fence." I've seen the monitors of the camera feed, and I know this area is totally covered. They'd be able to see the fence clearly. My walkie beeped back and the voice said, "We aren't reading any movement at the fence. Is it in the tree line?" "Negative. They're fiddling with the fence, right in front of me." This all happened in the span of seconds. My cigarette butt was still in my hands, and I just barely swallowed my last sip of coffee. They didn't even have the chance to reply to me, when from the fence I heard a massively loud thrash of the lynx, and all I saw was the figure full-on sprinting at me. I made a terribly embarrassing choking noise and crushed my coffee cup against the knob, trying to rush myself in. The fence is so close it's not going to take more than a few bounds to reach me. I pushed myself in so hard and held the knob in place, trying to figure the deadbolt into place. The knob was flicking down hard against my hold. I could hear and feel something moving against the opposite side of the door. I radioed back, "Get down here now!" But I already heard steps coming my way. The knob stopped moving by the time they got there. It was all over with. Back at the office, the security staff tried to play off like I was having a laugh about it, like this was a great Halloween joke I played. I didn't understand why they weren't taking it seriously until I saw the playback. It was just me outside. There was nothing there. My brain couldn't explain what I experienced outside while confronting the video. I immediately thought this was a big goof on me. Maybe they fiddled with the footage and had someone scare me, but they genuinely thought I was the one goofing with them. We were doing that whole back and forth, okay, whose idea was this? Who was messing with who? Until the second time watching the playthrough. We noticed the way the door handle kept moving even when I removed my hand from it. Both the inside camera and the outside caught it. I noticed right before I panicked and turned to run inside. The fence made a slight jolt as if it were pushed. There was no holes in the fence or any kind of cuts made where someone could squeeze through. There were no creepy shadows or unexplained wisps of smoke or lights or movements besides those. Just me in the night, jumping out of my skin and running inside. I kept trying to think back to when I jumped, when that figure burst at me full speed, if the light activated for their movement or mine. I couldn't decide. I couldn't remember exactly, it was so fast. But nobody there wanted to admit anything happened to me. It was tricks of the moonlight, overactive imagination and too much coffee. Branches against the chain links. No one's ever experienced anything weird here, and it wouldn't just start up here now for no reason. I didn't make a fuss. I didn't want to argue it. They already thought I was being weird about it. Maybe I was. I went about finishing my shift, but no one used the back door again that night, and it remained locked. The longest employed security was finishing up the shift at the desk with me in the office. It was before dawn. The morning shift was trickling into the parking lot. He watched the cameras in silence while I typed away. A few minutes before clocking out, he cleared his throat and told me, "I never really liked the north end. It feels like someone's eyes are always on me." It's honestly the most he's ever said to me in the year plus I worked there. The most I've ever heard him say. I felt like that statement held even more weight for that alone. I didn't quit though. I stayed on another 7 months until the company was bought out and they stopped overnight shifts to pile more work on day shifts for less money with less employees. There was never another incident. I never actually went out there again though. I stopped smoking, took my breaks out in the lobby, or wasted time chatting with coworkers. But I made excuses not to sit outside, to be honest. I feel like a few of us did. I have never before or since had any moments where I felt like my imagination got the better of me. And I truly believe that wasn't the case here. I keep thinking back at the door handle jerking down when I was steps away on the walkie. That had to be proof I wasn't imagining the whole thing. No one ever brought it up again, and wherever anyone asked about working in the old crappy factory, everyone would say, "Oh, we never saw anything up there, it's just a boring building at night." I would just smile and keep my side of the story to myself. But I wondered if anyone else was holding stories to themselves. Maybe they'd slip out after a few beers just to fuel a few more questions about the haunted factory.